And welcome back to House, the Shared Living podcast. We are coming off the back of our 100th episode, so this is our 101st, and we're still buzzing from our housed party that we had in London. A huge thank you to all of our suppliers, partners and sponsors who came along to the live recording and our little birthday shindig. Kept it quite light and low-key this year, but maybe we'll do a proper housed party next year. So yeah, it was great fun. It's proved really popular because we had a good look back at all of those key moments that we've talked about over the last couple of years, getting to our 100th episode. So yeah, thanks very much to everyone who's come along and everyone who's ever listened to an episode of Housed or two. Now, Sarah is not with us today, so it's just me and Deanie, and she'll be back very soon and certainly be back for UK Reef, so look forward to welcoming her back. But in the meantime, I'm Dan from Resi Consultancy and Verbaflow AI.
And I'm Deanie Lee from the Property Marketing Strategists.
And we're going to cover 5 things today, we think. The Association for Rental Living Tech Conference, LD Student Housing Conference, Inner Circle event that Deanie attended, where we're up to with the Renters' Rights Act, and a quick look ahead to UK Reef next week and the House Shared Living Summit. So let's crack on, but before we do, let's hear from My Student Halls.
Housed is sponsored by Spotlight Boost on mystudenthalls.com. Use Spotlight Boost to stand out in search results and drive more leads to your properties.
Massive thanks to Dan and the team at My Student Halls. Definitely worth getting that spotlight boost on as we move into peak season. It's really important that your properties are seen anywhere and everywhere. And let's not forget that all of these answer engines, the ChatGPTs and the Claudes and the Geminis, they are using a lot of marketplaces and listing sites as effectively their source of information. So, that is certainly something to bear in mind, not just SEO and the listings that it's good for, also it's good for AEO, answer engine optimization. But let's crack on and talk about the ARL Tech Conference. So the Association for Rental Living, this was the first in their tech conference series, and they were launching their report on AI in BTR in particular. So really enjoyed this event. Brendan Geraghty did a great job of coordinating and hosting that with Graham Sibley as well. Now, in terms of some of the talking points, this wasn't just about operational AI, and that's what I was there for, obviously, to talk on behalf of Verbaflow on my panel in particular. But it was as much about development and acquisition and how we're taking things through planning and what that could look like as well. It was good to hear Verbaflow name checked a few times, but a lot of the operators were actually really open, and they were sharing the best practice that they'd been through. And it's fascinating to see where everyone's at on the journey. Some people are going all in with building their own, and some people are, kind of dipping their toes in with suppliers, and some people are very much in bed with certain partners. And I think there's just a real mix. But one of the key takeouts that I saw was that I think BTR and co-living, which this conference was designed towards, is quite a bit further behind than the likes of student. And I don't know about you, Deanie, I wonder if that is because of the target market. Students are, I think, expecting AI a lot more, and I think that's why BTR and co-living maybe are, they're able to be that little bit slower. What do you think?
Well, I was going to ask, kind of, I guess, where the general view is on AI. Whether it sounds, everything that you've said there sounds like it's really kind of positive, and everyone's thinking positive, and everyone's trying new things. And was there any kind of concern about what the wider impacts, I guess, could be, or that people can't keep up with it? But my thing around student was, I was wondering, is that just the Verbaflow impact of why that it's more ahead in student? Is it just the operational piece, or is AI going in deeper than just the obvious places we can see it?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think that Verbaflow obviously takes care of the operational communications and any kind of communication with the resident. And we hear, therefore, a lot about that. But it's the things in the background. It's the how do you deal with your planning application? Actually, that brings me on quite nicely through to the panel that I was on, which was, it felt in the preliminary call like it was possibly mismatched, and that's no slight on Brendan or the ARL, but we had Cherry from Shared Voices. Now, that is a company that effectively collates planning feedback from real people and then make sure that that is all heard, and that all of those planning applications are then using that genuine feedback to hopefully improve their chances of going through planning. And they're dealing quite a lot with effectively AI campaigns against certain developments. So all it takes is someone to send around a template, and then you've got 1,000 people who have then objected. But a lot of those are technically just going to be the same things over and over again, or AI generated, or whatever it might be. So there was a real human element there on that panel. So there's some things that are being streamlined and automated, and some things where actually there's a bit of a doubling down on, no, we need that human element for this. And then I also had Catherine Crowley from Womble Bond Dickinson. That's such a great name, big law firm. In the first call before the panel, I just thought this could be a bit of a disaster if I go too hard about the fact that I don't think that law is going to be untouched by AI. To put it lightly, I actually think that law is going to be one of the most disrupted industries out there. And so, in the prelim call, I think it was a little cagey, but actually on the panel, Catherine was great. She was really super open and sort of saying, look, there is definitely going to be an impact here, but it's not going to impact me. And she's a senior partner in a very large law firm, and they need that, the key sort of strategic decisions and strategic work and the critical thinking in particular. Not to say that that Claude, for example, can't do any critical thinking, but what she was saying is there's going to be a big impact on junior roles and paralegals. And I wasn't sure quite how open that was going to be, but I literally ended up asking that direct question, saying, look, your job seems safe. What about the people who are starting to join your firm? And she was like, yeah, we're just hiring less people, and their roles are going to be quite drastically impacted because AI is doing the work of a junior paralegal or a junior lawyer. And that led on to a conversation about universities and whether they're preparing people for the real world. So it kind of almost came full circle. Like we had people saying, look, and the audience, I'm pretty sure, felt the same. I'm very much of the view that there's going to be quite a lot of disruption, and I do see that, for example, in BTR and student housing and effectively, hospitality, you could say as well, anywhere that there is a peak season for bookings or customer support, that seasonal staffing is going to be the first thing that is just not needed as much. Not saying that you won't need it at all, but if you hire, say, 100 people normally without AI, maybe you would hire 20, maybe 30, and make those savings and then have those automated responses. And the stat that we're able to give is that Verbaflow handles 90% of inquiries just using AI and hands off 10% to a human. So that is having a direct impact.
And that, I guess, that is what you're saying about kind of paralegals and those more junior roles is like, yeah, that seems like the obvious place that AI can take on those jobs. But then where's the stepping stone? If you don't have seasonal roles, where's the stepping stone into these jobs? And I think this is the real risk. And this is kind of where, I think your conversation around what do universities do and how do we train this in is actually, we kind of almost have to have that stepping stone piece probably in education, because if employers can get AI to do it, they're not going to pay people to do it ultimately. So that is fascinating. I think that comes back to my point about whether there's a positivity around AI, or are we looking at kind of where the risks are and where the flaws are? And it kind of feels that you had that balanced conversation on that session to say, actually, you've got to go full steam ahead, but you've also got to manage how we deal with the other side of it. I
totally agree. And it's people, I came off stage and people were like, wow, that was refreshingly honest. And that was because I basically talked about the fact that there was going to be disruption in every industry, but what it was going to look like specifically within each role. It was the same when I came off of the Class Foundation keynote in Florence at the Smart Living Conference. Everybody was like, whoa, okay, so you've actually listed the roles where there's going to be disruption within student housing and co-living in particular. So I just worry that, yeah, I agree with you, Dini. What is the stepping stone? Are we missing out on bringing the next real estate industry leaders through? But is every industry going to be missing out on that? Because universities are completely they're being found wanting when it comes to actually integrating AI into courses and modules and curriculums, and as our schools as well. And I think that you typically have a view where, it's very polarizing. AI is very, very polarizing. You either see that there is massive potential for disruption, and you can see that there are some operators, for example, in PBSA, moving towards that, where they're able to streamline, and their investors are looking for that too. And then you see somewhere it's a bit more, focused on the sort of there may be a bit slower moving. I don't mean that in the sense of being sort of condescending about it, because it just being slower moving just because you haven't implemented AI the way I think that you could or should. Everybody is moving at a different pace. BTR is clearly a bit slower than PBSA, and probably because of the customer, but I think everyone is at different stages on this journey, and you can maybe accept that, yes, it's going to look very different. We're going to be getting Waymos, and we're not going to need to drive fairly soon, and all of our AI agents are going to be automating absolutely everything. So it's going to be reallocating the value, and we can just focus on the high value tasks and things like that. But yeah, it does become potentially quite polarizing in the way that people are approaching it, but also quite concerning in terms of those graduate jobs, and also the jobs within our industry, within real estate, as to how you take that stepping stone into senior management. Because if we don't have the junior managers coming through, or maybe some of the resident support or leasing or whatever, that starts to become a leadership feeder problem, which will expose itself within the next 5 to 10 years, I would say, because this transformation is happening over the course of the next 2 to 3 years, realistically. So yeah, it's going to be fascinating. The conference was a real eye opener. One key thing just to add was that it was quite clear that the PMSs are a bit concerned about people building their own stuff. About people, some people are getting a little carried away and saying, "Oh, I can just get Claude to do that, or maybe we'll get a consultant in." And I could tell from some of the people from tech firms on the stage, where they were kind of, it was almost self-protection, just to kind of say, or self-preservation, just to kind of say, look, it's going to be tough to build your own stuff. We've done it. Don't reinvent the wheel, and all and all of this kind of stuff. But equally, there was someone on stage. Oh, we employed 2 ex-Google execs to create this thing for us. These are guys with like 2,000 beds tops. Employing 2 Google execs, you're looking at £500,000. And so for me, thinking like, wow, they are dropping huge amounts of money here, and I'm not 100% sure what they'll have to show for it at the end. I think I've not read the ARL white paper as yet on AI and BTR. We're actually going to start creating some of our own, because it's about time that we were able to show from our learnings what we've understood from how people are implementing, what customers are saying about it, and also what residents are talking about it. But it's clear there's a massive mix of approaches.
Yeah, but that's also a massive opportunity for PMS providers to actually go away and create a system that does all the things that it should do. And I mean, we do sales and marketing training. I was doing some sales and marketing training last week to a team, and we were talking about that. Still, the fact that we don't have systems doing what we need them to do. So instead of PMS people moaning about people go and do it themselves, go and get it right. Would be my call. So I think when it comes to AI and technology, I think, like most things in life, I think it's going to be a balance. And the thing that I always talk about is gravitas. And there's certain points in a relationship that it has to have that human, it has to be human to human, and it has to have that gravitas. And I think we're all going to be finding our way in that, of where our thresholds are on where we're willing to talk to a computer and when we're going to need human. And I think that's the bit that we need to navigate through and find. And I think these conferences that ARL putting on around tech, around AI, are going to be more important that people go to and attend, to get themselves educated on what's coming and how we can adapt.
I think, I mean, we talked a bit about the SaaS apocalypse, which is where you've seen that the likes of a HubSpot, a Salesforce, because pretty much most SaaS companies have really seen a massive share price drop, in the region of between 40 and 60% typically. And I think that's where a lot of the PMSs are a little bit concerned about, making sure they've got that walled garden effectively. But the great thing is that, we're seeing with Verberflow, we're seeing PMSs being open, and we're seeing them, they're taking their sweet time over some of these integrations. But some of them are saying, look, we know that you guys can do this better than us, so you go for it and we'll integrate with you and we'll build. That's what we're trying to encourage. I think everyone needs to encourage this openness, but I would say that because we're trying to integrate with the PMSs that are traditionally working on this old revenue model. So I think that is starting to become more of an open conversation. We'll cover that a lot more later on, but yeah, well done to Brendan and the team. And that was going on at the same time as LD Student Housing Conference. But before we cover that, let's hear from Utopia.
Utopia is the trusted partner for high-performance asset management, cutting energy costs, reducing risk, and delivering proven ESG results.
With billions of data points and 75,000 rooms monitored, Utopia turns real-time intelligence into measurable value, protecting investments and driving continuous improvement.
Choose intelligence that delivers. Choose Utopia.
Thanks very much to Ben and Jonathan and Chanel and the team at Utopia. We're very grateful for all your support through this season of the podcast, but also with UK Reef as well. Really looking forward to hearing Ben and Chanel on stage and learning where Utopia's up to with regards to all things sustainability, AI, and asset management in particular. So the LD conference was on at the same time as ARL. It was a real Sophie's choice for me as to which one to go to. But given that Brendan asked me to be on stage and I'll go to the opening of an envelope, I decided to go to the ARL. And I did then turn up at the Oval a bit later on to be greeted by Andrew saying, someone must be opening an envelope. I have to say that was some of the best feedback that I've had independently about a conference. It sounds like it was very well run, very relevant, and captured the mood almost perfectly. So I would say a big congrats to Andrew and the team there, because it's not easy to do that. And I think the worry is that a lot of the time we see some of these conferences, especially when they're investor-led, that are either sponsored by agents or agents are there because they have the credibility and the knowledge and the experience to be on stage and capture the investor imagination. But a lot of the time we end up thinking, where did you get these numbers from? So the number being talked about now is closer to 72,000 PBSA beds that we need to build by 2030. But there was a real acknowledgement that you cannot just build it and they will come. You have to really focus on those certain markets that don't have the supply demand challenges that others might. And the mood was constructive overall by the sounds of it. And I think that's the feedback that we're getting across the board. You can tell that the mood music has changed. It's not a case of watching an agent panel or reading an agent report and thinking, oh yeah, great, 200,000 beds need to be built, so let's just build some in Sheffield or Nottingham or wherever else. And it's much more nuanced now. There's more of a focus on that regionality in particular, and that's what I mean we've been pushing for that for quite some time, and that's what I think we're starting to see in some of these presentations.
I think as well the conversation that I heard was around that there's investors looking for that mid-market property now, and I think that's great because we're moving away from that high end. What I'd still argue is that actually there's a lot of people still in the mid-market actually, and that's not potentially where the gaps are. And I guess whilst I think the conversation is going in the right direction, I think that needs to move now to where are the gaps, because that's the way that we're going to need to build these 72,000 beds, is plug in the gaps. If we just keep building lots of mid-market, we're going to have the same problems that we're getting, and we're going to be pushing more and more students away from going to university and living away at university, because mid-market is still at a cost that is on the threshold. And this where viability comes in, and I know that's not as simple as just say let's build something and make it more cost effective, but I think this is where we need to move now, is where are the gaps, where can we find the gaps, and where can we make those gaps work so that we provide that broad spread of options in the sector for investors and customers.
Exactly. And now I had a really good chat with the CEO after the conference, who was saying that, yes, there is a bit of a focus on the middle in that sense, but there are a lot of people in the value gap here where, they are distinctly average products and yet they are extremely high prices for what you're getting. And effectively, and the analogy that was used was, this is an Aldi product at a Waitrose price. Now the issue is that we cannot build Aldis. We just can't do it. Building affordable is just not viable at the moment. So you have to kind of build the Waitrose and then know that will end up getting recalibrated, and the current version of a Waitrose will end up recalibrating and moving to more like a Tesco or whatever it might be. I think that analogy does actually work, so bear with me on that. But yeah, I think that overall it felt like, and the feedback that I got from this, and it was, well over 20 people were messaging me and saying to me at the time, like, this was one of the more realistic conferences. So I think Katie O'Neill from Knight Frank clearly did a great job of setting the tone, and that number 72,000, which is a big drop from the 600 odd thousand that we saw from a different agent last year, feels more realistic in the sense of there is an opportunity there to fill gaps. I certainly would not say that we do not need to build PBSA. I absolutely think we do. It's just a case of how can you make sure that PBSA is filling a gap so that all PBSA and all student accommodation options become more affordable. Because once again, this is not a supply crisis that we have. This is an affordability crisis. So the more that we can do to help build, the better. It will affect occupancy. We've seen that. Nottingham's a perfect example. You let the supply get completely out of control and everybody's occupancy drop. And you can see that in the City Council releasing their latest occupancy figures as well, showing that occupancy is moving to below the 80% mark. And I think that's something that we do need to think about, long term, but very much more nuanced, much more of a realistic, pragmatic and constructive picture, rather than just a blind, like, yeah, keep building, don't worry about it, everything's fine over here, no problems. And I think we need to be really mindful of the fact that PBSA is still incredibly solid as an asset class. It's one of the strongest by far in terms of the alternatives in the real estate sector. It is not just a case of build it and they will come. You can't just expect to underwrite 99% occupancy at, mid to high range rents anymore. And with a significant number of studios, there is a much more nuanced picture across the regions with exposure to different universities. It's still a very good income play. And I think for the right investors that have the long-term mindset, it is definitely a really good asset class to invest in. And that's what we want to encourage, long-term investment, and those pension funds ploughing money in, give us the security and go from there. So
it was, I mean, I wasn't there, but I did, from a couple of people had mentioned that there was a bit of lack of knowledge on the sector on renters' rights, which is both surprising and disappointing, really. And I think there's a lot of inconsistencies across the day of what people said it meant, what the rules were, and that, I guess, needs to change, I think. And that's possibly a factor of the PBSA sector has thought I'm exempt, so I don't need to understand it. And that's not true, I don't think. I think you do need to understand it. So that was a bit disappointing. And obviously, I think there's obviously ways that can be picked up in the sector. And the other thing I heard was just around the need to develop university accommodation, which has been an ongoing discussion for many, many years. But with the changing student demographics and with universities struggling to fill those beds, that's really hard for the private sector to come in and invest when the demand isn't necessarily where it needs to be. But the problem is that the demand's never going to get there because the bed's not good enough. So it's a real catch-22 situation ultimately in that scenario. But yeah, it did sound like a really good conference, and like you say, Dan, I think a really positive response and realistic response about kind of where the sector is and what the sector needs to do.
Agreed. And that university partnerships side of things, that is tricky. It really is, because I'm not sure you can rely on the numbers as much as you once could. Russell Group to a certain extent, but still, there are some Russell Group universities that are really struggling with their figures, but with their application numbers in particular. But it's making the economics of that stack up. The viability of doing a university joint venture, public-private partnership in that way is really tricky now. And there are some that are just avoiding it altogether. Some have, really gone all in, Unite, Arlington, etc. And, they're picking up things, as and when they can. But but I think that there just isn't the need. The universities right now are shedding their nominations agreements. We've seen that in the likes of Bristol. There's various other places as well that would love to shed their nominations agreements, and yet they've written in 10, 15-year noms. And so the operators are laughing in that sense with a cap and collar on it. It's going to be really tricky for universities. There needs to be a complete recalibration of how university accommodation is funded and what that model looks like. Do you need a hard noms anymore? Can you just rely on referral agreements? What does that do to the communities? Same things that we were talking about last year, but just the can's been kicked down the road. So no one's going to thank me in operators for saying to universities, don't sign these long nominations agreements and just work on referral agreements for sure. I've already had that feedback, guys. You don't need to write in. So that was quite a long bit on the event. I think it's worth covering LD and the ARL events in particular. Shame that they were on both days. Can you all just get together and coordinate dates and calendars well in advance, please, to the events organisers? That would be much appreciated. But first of all, let's hear from Wash Station, and then we're going to hear from Deanie about the Inner Circle event that she attended.
Wash Station proudly sponsor this episode of Housed. We provide best-in-class laundry solutions that complement your buildings. Wash Station. Smart, green, clean.
Thanks very much to John and the team at Wash Station. Really grateful for your support. If you have any laundry needs, whether you're in development or you're looking at retrofitting a new laundry, do get in touch with John Stotter-Marden and the team at Wash Station. So, Deanie, how was the Inner Circle event?
It was great, and that was a great link because John Stotter-Marden was there, so it was nice to catch up with him in person. So the Inner Circle events are organised by the lovely Mel Goff, previous of the Class Foundation. She's just actually moved into a new role as Partnership Director at Student FM, but she brought together these Inner Circle events as a way to talk about regeneration in focused locations. And she very kindly brought one to Bristol, which is my hometown, so I was very excited to go and do some networking, actually. Not in London, not in Manchester, not in other places, but actually in Bristol, in my hometown, and meet with my local network, which was great. But what is also interesting, and this is what I really like about these events that are outside of your kind of shared living comfort zones, is that it's a real mix of people across kind of real estate, infrastructure and placemaking. So you get a much wider sector of people to talk to, which really takes you outside your comfort zone and engages the conversation much wider. So this session was focused around the Bristol Temple Quarter regeneration program in Bristol, which is a massive regeneration program right by the station, which the university is a big part of it. On the panel was Karen Mercer from Bristol Temple Quarter, Peter Lisowski from the University of Bristol, Nick Allen from Cushman & Wakefield, David North from Osborne Clark, and it was moderated by Amy Dimmond from Osborne Clark. And it was a really good introduction into what is going on at Bristol Temple Quarter, the breadth of development that is happening there with the university at the centre around it. And there was a lot of talk around housing, affordability, and making sure the houses in that, which are both kind of student and non-student, are engaged as part of the community. And there's also talk from David around kind of retaining talent in those cities and actually not making sure that everyone runs off to London, that actually we managed to keep people in these cities. And Bristol University is doing an amazing job of bringing people from all around the world to study in Bristol and actually having these regeneration developments. And also Brabazon is another one, the opposite side of Bristol that's going on, is bringing all these developments together to really encourage people to stay in the cities that they study in and not run off to London. So it was a really great event. There was this great panel discussion, which really opened your mind into kind of the greater regeneration and placemaking that goes on in our sector. And then we had some local wine and cheese tasting, which was brilliant, and a lovely drinks reception outside on Osborne Clark's beautiful balcony looking across Bristol. So it was a really, really good event, and I do advise you to go and check out Inner Circle because they are moving around the country. The next one is in Glasgow in October, and it's just a really nice way to talk about shared living, but actually in the greater place of real estate, which it is. And I, as I've said several times before, I think we don't think of ourselves enough as real estate, and this is a really nice event and organisation that Mel is building that enables that to happen.
Love that. Well done, Mel and team. I really hope they take off, because I do think it's important to get people out of London. and start to understand those regional markets. And actually, a lot of the feedback we get at Housed is, can you talk about certain markets? And we've just had a few people say, can you talk about Europe a little bit more as well? And I think that feels like probably the right time to do that, because I think there's a lot of development opportunities in some cities and countries in Europe. We don't want to lump Europe together in one, but we've had people ask for, Netherlands episode, Spain, etc. So yeah, maybe we start doing a Bristol episode and looking at the regionals. And great that Mel's managed to get Inner Circle events off the ground. Do sign up for anything that comes to your city or town. But we'll always happily publicise those. So yeah, well done, Mel and the team. Going to move swiftly on to the Renters' Rights Act. Now, this could be an episode in itself, so I think we probably just need to keep it relatively light for now. And then we know that there's going to be a lot covered at UK Reef in particular, at the Housed Shared Living Summit next week. But I think it's worth talking about, because the Act was switched on the 1st of May. So we're 12 days in now, and I just want a bit of an idea of what's going on the ground. So I think this is probably just as much of an appeal to operators, whether you're BTR, PBSA, HMO, co-living, whatever else it might be. Do let us know how you're getting on with it, because quite a few PBSA operators have obviously reissued their contracts on the 1st of May. And I know firsthand that there are already students who are giving notice. There are some templates doing the rounds as well, and that's within PBSA, but also the rest of the board as well. That should be an exception for PBSA for this year, as those tenancy agreements are switched and the fixed term tenancies have gone. So they're now sort of assured periodic tenancies in that sense. But there is a statutory exemption for PBSA as long as they are part of the ANUC code, part of Unipol, but it is not retrospective. So there's going to be a bit of upset this year, I can see, in PBSA, with students not necessarily, or students taking the opportunity to potentially cancel a contract, given that they've not actually had to really sign anything yet. It's just been so badly handled. I don't mean by our sector. I think everyone's just, a lot of people are asking around. There's a bit of a coordinated approach in that sense of like, well, what the hell do we do? We've got zero guidance from anyone. And I think, looking at the likes of a David Smith, who's a really great commentator on all things Renters' Rights Bill, just literally search David Smith Renters' Rights in LinkedIn and you'll bring him up. I think, we have a real gap in information. And so I think we'll have a bit of an issue with some students giving notice this year, and that may be a continuation for HMOs and BTR and co-living beyond that. PBSA, it should be less so. That should be, almost a one-off loss of revenue and potential cancellations right now. But I do know that operators are working quite hard to make sure that those contracts are now signed, but they are seeing a little bit more than they thought in terms of the cancellations. So yeah, hopefully, that this isn't widespread, but there does need to be an information sheet that goes out to each resident before the 31st of May. And I think this is all just a stress test. So we'll keep sort of tracking it. But Deanie, what have you heard and seen? And I think how can we help operators better?
Yeah, I mean, I think like you, I have heard of a few switched on students who on the 1st of May sent out their notice straight away to say, well, I've given you my 2 months notice. I think that's minimal, partly because I think, as you say, Dan, the government haven't done a really good job of communicating these changes or preparing the sector for these changes and preparing renters for the changes. And I think that's where a lot of people still don't know as much about it as they should. And actually Housing Hand have recently done a survey on this, which I urge you to go and check out, because it kind of shows the extent of the problem of how little kind of renters understand around renters' rights and just generally renting in particular. So I think there is definitely some switched on students that are using this as an opportunity to get out of their tenancy. I don't think it'll be massively widespread because they don't really know. But I think, as you say, I think there's a period of adjustments that we're all in, and we all need to go through that adjustment and make sure that, like you say, Dan, those information sheets are going out on the 31st of May. HMOs do have ground 4A notice to be served if they need it. So there are there are opportunities out there, and it's just making sure you understand what you need to do, when you need to do it, and that your tenant understands the process.
Totally agree. And this is going to impact PBSA in particular this year, whether you're ANOC or not, but also BTR, HMO, co-living across the board. And the sector will never be the same again. Do go back and have a listen to our Ask the Expert sections with Howard Kennedy. We have covered kind of what you need to do and what that should look like. So just go back through our back catalogue and have a look for those specials. But in the meantime, there's just very little places that you can go for real help. And I think that is unfortunately what a lot of operators are coming to us for. We are not renters' rights experts in any way, shape or form, but we have had to do a lot of reading in it, partly because of client work, but partly because of people starting to demand it. So I would just encourage people to go and have a listen to those Howard Kennedy episodes that we did. But also, I think it's just start talking as an industry, like use those forums, use those events to say, look, what are you seeing? What are you doing? And that's, ensuring it's all above antitrust laws and things like that, and that you're not breaching anything there. But there's no harm in talking to industry leaders and saying, like, what's the plan here? Because we have zero guidance from government. Unipol and ANOC are doing all of this for the first time, of course. So, don't expect them to be a helpline as much as we've seen Victoria and Sam talking about renters' rights bill and feeding into it. Of course, we're very much on our own, whatever sector we're in. So best of luck, everyone. May the odds be ever in your favour. But yeah, do please reach out and let us know what you're seeing and what you're hearing on the ground, so that we can hopefully start to almost coordinate a bit more of an approach to it. Now let's finally hear from Howden, our final sponsor of the episode.
Howden is the 5th largest employee-owned business in the UK and one of the largest insurance groups globally. With over 60 years' experience, Howden's specialist education division delivers tailored insurance, risk management and wellbeing solutions for the education sector.
They're the trusted partner of nearly 1,000 schools, colleges, universities and student accommodation providers across the UK.
Howden helps owners and operators protect what matters most, and so they are the perfect sponsors for Housed. Thank you for coming on board for Season 6.
Thanks very much to Howden and the team. Do please get in touch with them for all of your student insurance needs, or pretty much any other insurance needs, given that they are the largest insurer in the country. So yeah, we're very grateful for them for their support for the podcast, and we look forward to working with them in the future as well. And that is us for this one. We look forward to Sarah returning. We look forward to UK Reef in particular. Now, that is going to be a very big event for us. The next few podcasts, they'll probably come in a bit of a flurry because we'll have those live episodes and maybe a bit of roving reporter content from UK Reef. They'll come in quick succession, but we'll be effectively summarising each of the days and what we've had at the Housed Shared Living Summit. If you are heading to UK Reef, please do use us as a base. We're in department. We're next to the bar. We're next to the cafe. Come in, grab your headphones, have a listen to some brilliant panels, really, really great sessions, and some live podcasts as well. So we'll be summarising the day, talking about what's coming up, and just making sure that we're ahead of everything on the sector.
And we will also be having a special kind of UK Reef Shared Living Summit WhatsApp group for the summit for the 3 days, just so that people can connect and find out what's going on, and we can send out kind of alerts of what's happening on panels up. So when you get to UK Reef, come and kind of take a zap of that QR code, and then you can come and join that WhatsApp group.
We'll no doubt put that on LinkedIn, etc. as well. But yeah, do come, swing by department. It's on the way to the food trucks and it's indoors. So if it's raining, it'll be nice and warm. If it's super hot, it'll be nice and cool. It's literally the perfect location. So do come and find us. Great panels. Should be really good network events as well. We look forward to seeing you all there. Thank you again to our sponsors and partners across the past 100 episodes that we've had now. And we look forward to seeing you all at UK Reef. Thanks for listening.